Hello guys, it's been far too long, but we are back. It's been a busy couple weeks for us here at the lab. We just signed on a client, we've got a new developer we're trying to get onboarded, so we've just been really slammed and busy. But in this video, we're going to pick up where we last left off on the other video, and what we're going to do is we're going to basically start with our example and our to-do example, and then we're going to basically create a class where we're going to extend off of to make our life a little easier working with Firestore. But first, we have to give a shout out to M. Her birthday was yesterday, the 31st of May, and our lovely friends over at Bing, the OneManBand channel, helped me put together a cover song of The Reason by Hoobastank. So if you didn't know that we actually are a band as well as a YouTube coding channel, now you know. And I will go ahead and put a link to their channel, OneManBand, as well as a link to the actual single that we'll be releasing on Spotify, Google Play, and the like sometime this week. So stay tuned and you can expect more from that. But let's get into it. Alright, so we're going to pick up where we left off in the last video. So what you can see here is we've got the to-do list. We can add a to-do, we can delete a to-do, and we can mark a to-do as complete. And if you've been watching this series thus far, you will know that I will probably say something like, you need to extract that in order to make sure that you don't have to go to one place to change things. So because I'm going to say that, we want to abstract this, but we want a service in this case. So service wrappers, or these services that we've been creating thus far, have been wrappers around external libraries or third-party libraries that we're wishing to wrap around in order to maintain compatibility or allow us an out to integrate into another service that might offer similar abilities. So what we want in this case is a model. So we want a model that will talk directly to our collection of documents and allow us to interact. And again, it gives us that same benefit of when we have to change something or when we want to add some kind of functionality. For instance, maybe every time we add a to-do, we want to do something specific. Now, instead of going to all the different pages where we have the to-do logic or the to-do add logic, now we can just go and do it in one spot. And if you're familiar with the MVC architecture on front end or back, you will be familiar with the model. The model in this case is going to be the representation of a collection of documents. So let's go ahead and make one so we can see this in action. Under our source, under components, let's go ahead and do new folder, and we're going to make, oops, not under components, under source, we're going to make a new folder called models. And in that folder, let's go ahead and make a new user.ts model. So this is going to be our user model, because you can see all of the stuff that we've been doing thus far has all been on this user collection. So we're going to make a user model in order to interact with the user collection. So in our user here, let's go ahead and export class user. Okay, so now we've got a class. And the first thing we're going to do is let's set up the collection that we're going to be working with. So let's go ahead and say protected collection name, and we're going to set that equal to users because it's the users collection. And then what we're going to need to do is we're going to be calling this.db. And you'll remember that DB was initialized in our app root. So in our app root, we initialize the DB service and then we pass it down into the page. So what we're going to do, and what we're going to need to do, is we're going to pass this guy, we're going to pass it into the actual user, user class here, or the user model. We're going to pass that in and inject our dependencies. So dependency injection, this is what that means. We're going to inject the dependencies that this service needs, this class needs, this model needs. We're going to inject that into the constructor. So, and remember, the constructor is just what runs when we initialize a class. So we're going to go ahead and pass in one argument here, dependencies. So we're going to pass in a list of dependencies, an object full of dependencies, and it's going to have one dependency for right now, DB, which is going to be an instance of the database service, and you'll see it automatically imports that guy for us. And then what we're going to do is we're going to set that to our local class here. So let's go ahead and say protected DB is going to be an instance of the database service, and now we can say this.db equals dependencies.db. So now we're just passing in, when we call this new user service, user model, we're going to basically pass in the dependency for the database, and then we're going to set that to the local. And now what we should be able to do, let's go and put this side by side. Let's go into our app home, and our functionality for getting the list of to-dos, because that's the first thing that happens when the page loads, let's go ahead and abstract this into a method. So let's go ahead and copy this guy out, and then let's go ahead and make a new get method. And you can see we've already got DB defined because there it is right there. And we can see that we're getting some squiggly underlines because to-dos, my to-dos is set here in app home. But what we're actually going to do is let's just, first off, let's abstract this a little bit more, because we're constantly doing this right here. We're constantly getting this DB collection users. So let's go ahead and make a method here called collection. And then we can actually just return the instance of this.db collection. Instead of .users, let's just go ahead and do this.collection name. So now you can see we're saying, okay, this DB collection name. So that's going to get us the users collection. And now down here, we can just simply say this.collection. So that's going to be an alias almost for the actual user collection. That also means that inside of our pages, if we want to call this collection, just get the collection reference, we can just call that. So now we don't have to call this.db.users. We can now just call user.collection, and that will get us the same result. Okay, so then the second part of this, we get the doc session user ID. So this is another case where we probably want to pass in the session as a dependency. So let's go ahead and do that. So protected session is going to be an instance. Let's see what session is set to. It's going to be our Firebase user. So let's go ahead and add those typings. And then we're going to pass that in as well. So our second option here is going to be session, and it's going to be an instance of firebase.user. And then we're going to set this.session equal to dependencies.session. Cool. So now we're passing in our session, and so now our error goes away there. So that looks pretty good. So yeah, that looks pretty good. So now the get method here, you can see we're doing some stuff whenever it gets a snapshot. So what we can do to abstract this and to make this so that, again, we have one method where we're running this, let's go ahead and just pass in a callback here. So our get method is going to take one callback, and it's going to be a method that returns the snapshot, and it's going to void. It's going to return nothing. Okay, cool. So now right here, so we can see this is where we're doing that snapshot logic. Let's go ahead and just call callback. And then there's our error handling that we can use. Cool. And then we're going to go ahead and return, this as well. And that way we can do, so you can see we do this dot on snapshot. I don't think this returns anything, to be quite honest with you, but yeah, I think we'll just return that, just that we have something returning. And then you can see we're getting our error, and we can handle it in here, maybe do something that we want to do, or we could maybe throw an error and use like an async function here. That's another option. So cool. So now we've got our callback. And then now on our other side here in our app home, in our get to-dos, we can simplify this a little bit. We can say get to-dos is actually just going to run this.user.get. Well, and let's make it a little bit more precise. get to-dos. Even better, let's get to-dos. Cool, so there's our get to-dos method that we've made inside of our model. Let's go ahead and wire this model up so we can run it inside of our app homepage. So let's go up to the top here, and we're going to import our new model. So let's import user from models/user. Cool, so now we've got our user model, and now we can go about initializing this guy. So what's cool is we don't we can actually implement these guys as needed, and that's what we're actually going to do here. We can go ahead and in our component did load here, we can pass in. You can see here, this is where we run our this.getTodos. We can pass in here we can pass in here we can initialize here the user service and then save it here to our user model. And actually, I'm going to change this here, model like so. There we go. So now we get user model, and then up here, let's go ahead and set a user equal to user model. And then down here in our component did load, we're going to say this dot user equals new user model. And then remember, we have to pass in the dependencies. So we're going to pass db as this.db and session is this.session. And you'll note we're only running this if there is a session. So if there is no session, they're not even going to get the user model instantiated. So we're good there. So okay, so now we've created our user model and we've saved it to our page here so that we can use it. Now we can go about calling this guy inside of our get to-dos. So instead of get to-dos, instead of setting this to-do subscription equal to this guy, we can instead say this to-do subscription equals, and then we're going to say this.user.getTodos. And remember that there was a callback that's passed into that, and that's what's going to run this guy. Except there's no secondary argument. If we wanted to, and sure, why not? We do. Let's do an error, and it is also going to be a method that returns nothing. And then it's going to include the error message. Cool. So now we can do that same thing here. Let's just abstract this out and call this error. There we go. So now we're passing so simple to-dos, get to-dos method here on our model. It's going to get the collection, the current collection, then it's going to get the document for the current user, and then it's going to get the to-do collection underneath them, and then on their snapshot it's going to give them the callback as well as the error. And so now we should have the same result. So you see snapshot, we need to say snapshot. Okay. So now same general principle, same thing, except now we have the ability to change some kind of functionality when we get to-dos across our entire application. We're not stuck having to change it out in all of our pages, and now we've wrapped it in this nice little user service. And again, this gives us one place to go and rip and replace things. Cool. So now we've got that method redone. Let's go ahead and get the rest of these refactored here and put into this new user model. So there's the delete to do. So let's go ahead and get that guy set up, or add to do. Here we go. So let's go ahead and start with add to do. So add to do. And let's go ahead and pass in. We don't need the event because we can do that inside of this page. But we can do this section right here. This piece right here is what adds the to-do, right? So let's go ahead and create that. So we'll say add to-do is going to do this, and we're just going to return this guy immediately. And then what we can do is this.form data. Instead, we just want to say data, and then this would be a good opportunity for us to add some typings to force us to add in the specific fields that we need. So you can see here our form is really simple. It just has one field called to do. So now I can set what we require here, which is to do, and it's going to be a string. And so now instead of form data, we can just say data. And so this gets us to another reason of why this is important and why this paradigm is really crucial, is because now instead of just running some arbitrary thing and saving some data, now we have the ability to add some typings. So now when I say this dot user dot add to do, it's simpler, so now that's a lot simpler than writing this line here. And two, now if I start to pass in data like to do, you can see it's going to require the typing. So it's going to allow us to structure our data and require that there's certain fields that exist and that they're the right types. So now if I pass in form data, it should be all right, because remember our form data only has one field and it's to do. So our typings match up. But for instance, if I were to say that we require another thing, or checked, which is Boolean, if I were to require something like that, now we can see our form data is going to tell us, hey, I'm expecting to get this, and what you've defined here is not enough. So, yeah, that gives us some stuff to work with, right? Cool. Okay, so now we've got our add to do, and let's go ahead and remember to throw the await keyword there, because this is going to return a promise. So let's go ahead and throw that await keyword there so we can await that. Cool, so that should make the add method work just as it did before. So add, and there we go. So we've got the same functionality there. And now we can do that same thing to like delete to do or get to do's, or sorry, get to do's, we already did that one. Toggle to do, you can start to move these things into the actual thing here. So let's go ahead and say toggle to do, and we're going to pass in the reference and whether or not it is finished, same way we did before. And then here we're going to do the exact same method, except we're just going to return back the promise, and we'll let the await still happen here. So now we can say this dot user dot toggle to do ref and finished. Cool, so there's our toggle to do. And now let's go ahead and do our last one here, delete to do. So we'll leave our confirmation here because we probably don't want the model itself to be worried about displaying confirmations and stuff like that. We just want the functionality here. So let's go ahead and say delete to do, and we're going to take the ref and we're going to, again, same thing, we're just going to say return ref dot delete. Same thing here, await this dot user dot delete to do ref. Cool, so now we've abstracted all of the functionality. So our adding, our deleting, and our checking off, all is now happening inside of this user service. So now we can use this user service across our application, and we're guaranteeing that it's going to work the same way as long as we're calling these same methods. Okay, cool, so that's awesome. Also, we have this method here. Let's go ahead and make an update method for our user so we can update the current user. So let's go ahead and say update. And this update method, it looks like it's going to take in just the user ID and the data that's being updated. So we're going to say ID, it's going to be a string, and then we're going to have a document. And again, this is another case where we can use some typings. I'm not going to in this case, but that's something that we can do here to set our data. So now let's go ahead and get this guy and paste it here. And again, this db.update users, now we can basically circumnavigate this stuff by just doing this .db.update this collection name, and then we're not going to use the result user ID. We're going to use the ID that they've passed in here. That means we need to take this guy out. And then over here, we're going to say this await this .user.update, and then we're going to pass in the user ID as the first argument, the data that they have here as the second argument. And data. There we go. And we don't need to await it. Again, let's just return back the promise, and then we will let them await it and do any kind of error handling or anything they want to do on this side. Awesome. Okay, so there we have, let's save on this side. So there we have it. So now even the updating after we log in is all happening inside of here. So what you might notice, so this is good. Let's go ahead and save this. Add user model and abstract, refactor, homepage. Okay, so now we've got that part of it, right? But what you might notice is there's some common things like this collection as well as update. These are things that we're going to repetitively be doing across all of our collections. We're always going to be updating, setting in an ID and this and that. So what if we could extend our class in order to kind of automate some of this process and make this a little bit easier to replicate across multiple different classes. And you can use the same paradigm that you're going to learn here to do this across a bunch of different things. So if you have a couple different things that all have underlying the same like methods and different properties, you can use a class and then extend off your new classes off of that in order to kind of help you speed up the process. So let's go ahead and do just that. We're going to create in here a new model.ts, and this is going to be the base plate that we're going to build our models off of. So we don't need our home page anymore. We just need our new model service, or our new model, and this guy. So okay, so let's go ahead and abstract the common methods that we have here. We have this dot collection as well as update. So these are the two that we know that across all of our collections we're going to have this collection method as well as update, and you can use this knowledge here to expand upon that as much as you want. So to do this, let's same thing, export class model. So we're going to make a model class. And then what we want to do is let's go ahead and set the protected, we're going to set the collection name here. And what we can do is our collection name, we're actually going to be passing that, or we're actually going to be defining that, right? We define that inside of our collection over here. So we should be able to say collection name. And we're not going to set it. We're going to set this as by default on our actual user model when we create it. But we will need to define. Let's go ahead and say protected DB is database service, because we're going to need that no matter what. And then we're going to run our constructor just like we did before. And that same practice, we need to, just as we injected the dependencies into our user model, we need to do that into our base model too. So let's go ahead and do dependencies, and we'll just copy this bit here. We're going to do dependencies, but in this case we don't need, so the session is something specific to this model, right? So we don't need that. So let's go ahead and just do our DB dependency, and then we'll do that same thing, this.db equals dependencies.db. And then what we can do is let's go ahead and copy our, even worse, let's cut it. Let's cut our collection method, and then let's also cut our update method, because those are common. And okay, cool. So now we've cut those two methods, and we're getting some errors, and that's exactly what we would expect. And actually, I just realized we could refactor this guy out as well. This dot collection. Oops. Collection. Stop auto-completing. Okay. Oh, you son of a. Okay, so there's our collection. Okay, so now we've got our methods abstracted, and we're going to get errors all over the place here. And that's because we need to extend off of this class. So now we've made this class with these methods, but we need to extend so that we can actually go about utilizing these guys. So let's go ahead and do that. And that's going to be really simple. All we need to do is up here where we define our class, we're going to extend model. But then we need to, or extends with an S, extends model. And you will see model is not defined, and that's because we need to import that as well. So let's go ahead and import model. And let's, instead of this saying export class model, let's just export default class. And what that's going to do is it's going to export whatever this class is as the only one and only export. So that'll allow us to do import model from /model. And so now that's going to allow us to go about importing this model, and you can see we don't need the curlies or anything like that. We're just doing one specific service, and we can name it whatever we want right here. It's this first argument in our import. So now we're going to get a different error. So now you'll see this.collection is not giving us an error anymore, but our constructor is giving us an error. And that is because remember that this model class has its own constructor. And so that constructor needs to be called in order to initialize itself so that we can build our class off of that, right? And so to call your class above that you're extending off of, we call a method called super. Or property, sorry, a property called super. So now we can say super dot, and then you can see there is all the different methods on our super class. So now we can do super, and then we want to just call it like it's a method. So we're going to say super, and then we're going to pass in our dependencies. And remember, we're going to have db, and it's going to be an instance of dependencies db. So now we're calling our super class, and then that's going to build this off of it, and now we should get the exact same functionality. There it is, except note we didn't define a collection method here. We didn't define the collection. We instead are using our super class over here to build off of. And so you could do your, and this is traditionally what we do, we create like a find method, a update. So the CRUD methods that you need, create, read, update, and delete, create all of those inside of a model like this, and then you can replicate that over and over and over again without having to do anything. You just, as you create your new classes for your new collections, you just basically extend off of this model, and then that lets you to take out some of this repetitive bits that you do over and over again. So there is our working example. I'm going to commit this guy up, set up a super class for models. And again, I will return probably sometime this week or next week to talk about Firebase hosting. So now we've got our application built, and now we want to ship this thing out to Firebase and host it on the web so that we can go and give that link out to other people so they can actually start using our application. So that's what we're going to get into next week. So make sure that you like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss it. And to plug again, it's Emily's birthday as, oh, other way. Ship-a-chow! It's Emily's birthday as of yesterday, and now it's over, but we made a cover song, and OneManBand helped us make it, and you should watch it with the link in the script. You should go watch it. It's really